चलो ठीक है. होने वाली है. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Please recite a Fatiha for today's sponsors, the Nakhli family and the Rizvi family, inshallah.
من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم صلى يا سيدي يا رسول الله صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا أبا عبد الله صلى الله عليك وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك وأناخت برحمك يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. Salutations upon you, O Prophet of Allah. Salutations upon you, O Allah. Surely we wish we were with you, for that would be the greatest of victories. Karbala, 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 martyred on the land Karbala, praise the land of Karbala. Karbala, across the land of Karbala. Shaheed Karbala, martyred on the land of Karbala. Salam Hussein. Together now, let the Imam hear us. Assalamu ala Hussein wa ala Ali ibn al-Hussein wa ala Hussein أصحاب الحسين وعلى الذين بذلوا وعجهم دون الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Holy Quran, and what he says is the truth. In the chapter of Al-A'raf, chapter 7, verse 54, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَلَا لَهُ الْخَلْقُ وَالْأَمْرُ تَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Surely to Allah is the world of creation and the world of command. Glorified is Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We start first and foremost with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Walhamdulillah alladhi لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه وعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود فطر الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووتد بالصخور أول الدين معرفته كمال معرفته التصديق كمال التصديق به توحيده. ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين حبيب إله العالمين وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. صلوات. واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. Brothers and sisters, on this last day, our goal is to tackle the topic of predestination. And the reason why we have to talk about predestination, when it comes to the events and the tragedy of Karbala, is because of the fact that this was a weapon that was used by not only the Umayyad dynasty, but later on the Abbasid dynasty, in order to be able to control the people. So today our goal is to look at predestination. First, we will analyze it from the logical perspective. Then we will look at it from a scientific perspective. And then finally, we'll look at it from the Islamic perspective and how it was that it was used by the school of the caliphs to control the people. So let's get started. So logically speaking, if we go back to our reference point, which we established in the very first lecture a couple of nights ago, in which we were able to prove that the Creator is unlimited. And unlimited means that he neither has a beginning nor an end, and therefore he is independent, meaning that he is not in need. He is the creator of all things. He existed always and will always exist. We said the fact that he is unlimited means that he is flawless, because flaws are limitations, and therefore he is all perfect, which also means that he is all purposeful, all just, all wise. And that means then that anything that he does is going to be with purpose, including him choosing for me to exist. Not only that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all wise, meaning that everything that he does out of his wisdom. Everything has a reason. Now, now that I've established this reference point, it becomes important for me to look at the issue of choice, logically speaking. Because I know that there are things that I have a choice in, and I know that there are things that are pre-programmed within the system. So logically speaking, what I'm going to do is I'm going to empirically observe the world around me. I see, for example, that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. I find that this happens every single day. Now, this is an example of what? This is an example of something that's predestined, pre-programmed. I know, for example, that my heart beats at a certain number of beats per minute. I know that that's something I cannot change, right? I know I can improve it, for example, through exercise, but I know that there's a set standard for heart rate. I know also that I can't control my liver function, that it's set to work a specific way. I know that my kidneys are set to work a specific way. I know that the bacteria in my stomach are set to work in a certain way. These are all things that are pre-programmed within this world, right? The planets are set in their orbits to orbit around the sun. And that tells us then that through empirical observation, that there are things around me in this world that are pre-programmed in the system that Allah Almighty created. Now, I also know that when that buzzer goes off in the morning and I decide to hit the snooze button, that's a choice that I make, right? I also know that getting out of bed early or getting out of bed late is also a choice that I make for myself. Now, I know that there is a necessity for choice, logically speaking, because as we mentioned before, nobody likes to be compelled, right? It's considered an ugly and cruel act to force someone to do something. So we know then that forcing someone to do something is considered to be a flaw or deficiency, right? So that means then that Allah Almighty would not compel us. He would not force us to do something. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is flawless, He's all perfect. And therefore, it must be that He gives me choice in what? In choosing Him, in choosing to be obedient to Him, in choosing to show gratitude to Him, right? And if I am to do so, then of course He's going to reward me, logically speaking. And if not, then He's going to punish me, just as we would do in our regular educational system or work system and so forth. Therefore, then, I understand that there are things that are pre-programmed, right? And these are things that we can say are predestined to work a certain way in order for the system to work meticulously, right? And then there are things that I have a choice in, and we're able to prove this logically. Now, if we move on to the scientific perspective, we find that just as we were able to observe, empirically speaking, the world around us, scientists also did the same thing. And I want to focus specifically on two types of scientists, or two specific scientists, I should say. One is an MIT professor who existed in the 1960s. His name is Edward Lorenz. Now, Edward Lorenz did his PhD at Harvard on meteorological and atmospheric climate change. Now, the contention before was that climate change was something that was haphazard and chaotic. However, Edward Lorenz was able to prove is that in actual fact, this is a supreme form of organization that we don't realize because of its complexity. And he was able to come up with algorithms for climatic change. And that's actually what allows us today to predict the climate. Also, if we look at a gentleman by the name of Mandelbrot. Now, Benoit Mandelbrot was also a Harvard professor. He had 15 PhDs and he held the chair of Einstein for many years. Benoit Mandelbrot actually was able to prove that what we perceive as being haphazard and random actually is a supreme form of organization. And he was able to develop the algorithm for it. His contention, and what he was able to prove, is that everything in this world, at the end of the world, comes from a small mathematical fractal that, when multiplied, gives us the current form that we see it in. So, as a simple example, in order for an organism to exist, a multicellular organism, it has to be composed of multiples of that cell, right? So, for example, an onion, right, has onion cells. If let's say that cell, that one cell, onion cell, is a fractal, then that multiplied will then give us the form of the example. If we look at the human heart is composed of cardiac cells, right? Cardiac cells are repeated over and over and over and over again. And with the genetic code that is within them, and the genetic code within the chromosomes of a human being, the shape of the human heart is predetermined to be a specific size, right? And to function in a specific manner, and to have those specific types of cells. The same goes for skeletal cells, musculoskeletal cells. When it comes to our muscles, right? There's a specific form of cell as well. That is pre-written within the genetic code, how it will be, what its function will be. The same way osteocells, meaning bone cells. The same with nerve cells. So what was Benoit Mandelbrot able to actually prove? Benoit Mandelbrot, his goal was to study to figure out how to determine the size or the circumference of the UK. And in so doing, he realized that there are many organic forms that are formed by land masses that look extremely random and therefore might be hard to predict. But since, of course, materials in this world have atomic structures, right? For example, solids have a compact atomic structure. Liquids have a looser atomic structure, and gases have an even looser atomic structure. So when water from the ocean hits the land, water having an atomic structure or the of H2O is compacted in a specific way, right? Loosely, not because it's not solid. When it comes into hitting the land mass, it's going to, in organized fashion, take a certain amount of it. Positive erosion on the side of the landmass. Now, the landmass, the material that's taken from it is going to be a solid. Now, sand, then it's essentially silicon dioxide, right? So that has a specific atomic structure. When it's removed, it will be a specific type of shape. Now, of course, with other effectors, whether it's the seaweed or whether it's the size of the currents and so on and so forth, he determined that this is a supreme form of organization. It's like Edward Lorenz determined in his atmospheric studies. And Benoit Mandelbrot here, what he was able to do was to develop and to discover the algorithm that allowed him to determine and figure out exactly the circumference of land masses based on this fractal mathematics. And today he is known as the father of modern fractal mathematics. Now, how did humanity benefit from fractal mathematics? Now, it's obvious how we benefited from studies on climactic and atmospheric change and predictions. But when it came to the issue of fractal mathematics was used in all sorts of things. So the fractal antenna, for example, is used in our phones. So our phones, this phone, for example, that I'm holding in my hand, has a tiny little antenna. When phones were first created, they were cell phones specifically. They were blockish. You would have to carry them in a suitcase. They were silver, right? For those who recall those days. And the reason why is because the antenna had to be big, right? And the components within had to also be big at the time. The technology hadn't reached today. But once fractal mathematics was discovered, we found that the size of the antenna became smaller and smaller and smaller, and even its shape to the form of a fractal, which has a very specific shape, right? It's an instance. And as small as it is in our phones, it's still able to not only receive telecommunications and send telecommunications, but that size really is enough for that to occur and occur efficiently and effectively. That small size of that fractal, that instance of it, right? So that tells us then that supreme forms of what organization exists within this complex world that though we might not realize are supreme forms of organization, they actually are. And this is pre-programmed within the system, which therefore means that things are predestined to work a certain way. I'll give you a third example. Fractal mathematics was also used in the development of modern CGI, what we see in modern graphics today, right? And animations, whether it's smoke or whether it's the movement of oceans or seas, or whether it's how the wind moves the leaves on a tree, and so on. We see that being implemented today in all of the animations that we actually watch and the CGI that exists in movies. So it has multiple applications. Also, we find that even in biology, for example, those who are in ecology, when they're trying to measure the number, let's say, of trees in a specific forest, they also use that very algorithm developed by Benoit Mendelbrot to not only determine the size of the forest, the number of trees, the number of branches on the trees, right? Remember, the branches are instances, the sub-branches are instances until you get to the smallest instance. And they all actually adhere to the exact same formula that was developed by Benoit Mendelbrot. So that tells us then that there's a supreme form of programming that exists in this world, right? Just as if I was to play, let's say, and I like to use this example a lot, the PlayStation or the Wii or the Xbox, for example, or any application on your phone that is a gaming application. You find that the programmer, what does he do? He programs a choice, and that choice, if you choose it, will have, for example, 4 other choices, right? Those 4 other choices, each one may have 4 other choices, but now the programmer here is in total control, in actual fact, of all of your choices, in that he gave you what possible choices you might choose, you see? But the programmer does not control your choice. He gives you the option of choosing whether you go right or left, whether you choose option 1, 2, 3, or 4. And that doesn't reduce your enjoyment of the game. That doesn't reduce your accomplishment when you accomplish your game, success in that game. It doesn't take anything away from it, right? Now let's take a look at, so then logically speaking, we're able to prove that there is both predestination, things that are pre-programmed to be a certain way in this world, as well as free will, meaning free choice, right? And there's a necessity for that choice because to be compelled or to be forced to do something, right? And scientifically speaking, at this world, and what scientists were able to prove are things that are predestined, right, pre-programmed within this world. But we notice also that even in the very games that our kids play or that we might, we find that, we do have the choice of how to use that system, right? Just as we do have the choice of whether, we take care of our oil tankers, right? Maintain them so that they don't spill in the ocean, right? That's at the end of the world choice. So if we don't maintain those tankers, then we're going to have a spill in the ocean, right? That's the result of our system of choice. So we have a choice and there's a system of choice. The fact that there is a very system of choice doesn't mean that I don't have free will to choose what I want. Okay? Now, let's take a look at the Islamic perspective. Now, in Islam, we started out first and foremost in this lecture today. We started out with the chapter of Al-A'raf, chapter 7, verse 54, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَلَا لَهُ الْخَلْقُ تَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ. Surely to Allah is the world of creation and the world of command. Glorified is Allah, the. Now, this verse is extremely important. Why? Because it explains to us Allah's system. Now, it explains to us how the system is made. Let me explain. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here describes the world of khalq, the world of creation, as well as the world of a world of command. Now, what are these two worlds? The world of khalq is the world of creation. It's a systematic, gradual system, meaning that if you plant a seed, right, and you place it within a fertile ground and you give it water, then that seed will start to germinate. And when it germinates, you'll slowly see the two hands or two leaves coming out towards the sky, almost looking as though they're in dua and gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And then that plant will grow and more leaves, and then it will grow flowers, and those flowers will be pollinated by the bees, and then they will, once they're pollinated, they will actually form fruits, and someone will come, an animal will pick those fruits, and they will eat them, and then they will excrete the seeds, right? So that they are and planted in fertile soil, right, in manure, and the system continues. Another example is the water, for example, or how, let's say, the earth is actually fertilized, right? So it evaporates into the sky, right? And what happens? It turns into clouds. The wind pushes those clouds towards the earth. Now, these, once over the earth, we find what we see is, of course, this occurs over the oceans as well, but for the purpose of our example, the clouds collide, right? Once they collide, we hear, see the lightning, we hear the thunder, right? And what happens? The lightning creates a reaction in the atmosphere between nitrogen and oxygen, forming nitrous oxide. The rain starts to pour, bringing the nitrous oxide down to the soil, fertilizing the soil for the seed to receive its nutrients, right? To turn into that plant that we were discussing earlier. So then this is the world of the fact. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also describes it in the formation of a human being, in which he says in the chapter of Al-Mu'minun, in chapter 23, verse 14, or 12 to 14, I should say. Allah says, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ سُلَالَةٍ مِنْ طِينٍ. We created man from a specific type of clay. وَجَعَلْنَاهُ نُطْفَةً فِي قَرَارٍ مَكِينٍ. Then we made him an embryo placed within the womb. ثُمَّ خَلَقْنَا النُّطْفَةَ عَلَقَةً. Then we made this embryo into a zygote, right? فَخَلَقْنَا الْعَلَقَةَ مُضْغَةً. Then we use that cellular structure to continue to proliferate, right? And to form a fetus. فَخَلَقْنَا الْمُضْغَةَ عِظَامًا. And we started to create bones within it, right? And then we're able to create flesh over that bone. And then we find that it came into a form that's different than what it was created initially. فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. Glorified is He, the best of creators. So this is the system of khalq that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking about. In the verse of 7, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that verse mentions al-amr, the world of the command. Now, the world of the command is the world of kun fayakun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Holy Quran in Surah Yasin, chapter 36, verse 82, Allah says, إِنَّمَا أَمْرُهُ أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَن يَقُولَ. Surely his command, his word of command, is that if he wants something, all he has to do is say to it, be and it shall be. Okay? So this be and it shall be is how our soul is created. According to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, in Imam says, this is how the soul is created, right? 2,000 years before, it is infused within the fetus, right? That word is called Alam al-Dhar, the world of the Alam. So the soul itself, we know, is created by Alam al-Ard because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and say, they ask you about the soul, say, the soul is from the command of my Lord. Surely Allah has, you haven't been given a lot of knowledge. So then the soul is created by Allah's command, right? So whereas everyone when they ask you about the soul, the soul is from the command of Allah. So we see here then the dynamic of the world of creation as well as the world of the command. Now we, as human beings, we are basically the confluence or the coming together of those two worlds, right? So we exist in the world of creation. That's how our bodies are created, just like that seed, right? And in the fourth month, 2,000 years before the creation of each one of us, our souls were created by Kun Fayakun, and Kuchabi. And then our souls are infused in the fourth month into the fetus itself. Okay? And that's why we find that Islam, it's stated that life enters the fetus after 4 months. Now, and scientifically speaking, we find that the sexual orientation of the child is determined after the fourth month, usually the fifth month when the sonogram is done. So now we understand then this system, right? How the confluence, how these two systems come together, the world of the command and creation, according to we also find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, in the chapter of Dahr, the chapter of Insan, He says, Inna hadaynahu sabila imma shakiran wa imma kafura. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, surely we guided him to the straight path. Either he is thankful, right? And he chooses to be obedient to us and follow that path, right? Or he is disbelieving and unthankful and doesn't follow that path. So that means that according to the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, look, I've given you all that you need. I've shown you where the path is. Inna hadaynahu sabila. Guided him, not just shown him. We have guided you to that path, right? But it's up to you to choose. Either you're thankful and you're obedient, or you're unthankful and you don't follow that path. So we see here then that there are things that are predestined according to the Quran, which is the world of the creation and the world of Amr, right? And then the world of the command. And there are things that are based on our choices, right? Which is the choice to, once we're in this world, it's the choice to follow the straight path, the choice to be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Was asked about destination of free will. So Imam Ja'far Sadiq said to the man, he said, he said, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. That's what we've seen through our observations and empirical observations. That's what science has also shown us and proven to us, right? And that's what the Holy Quran and the process as well. So then what is it and why is it that Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad and of course Muawiyah before, right? But Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad specifically within the saga of Karbala, as well as Muawiyah, why is it that they were trying to preach to everyone destination, right? Now, you have to understand that Muawiyah, la'natullahi alayhi, as I explained before, he was appointed to the role of governor of Sham from the time of Umar ibn Khattab. He's the one who appointed him. Sham, really, in essence, was very separate than what would be the rest of the Islamic world, in that the governorship of Muawiyah had a lot of control over Sham, right? So the Western world was open to Sham, to Damascus and so on. So with the coming of new converts and so on and so forth, he had the opportunity to not only control those who are within, let's say, quote unquote, his kingdom, right? He was also able to control those who came into Islam and the version of Islam that he would teach them. And one of the things that he preached heavily was the issue of predestination. Why? Because that's the only way that he could hang on to the Khilafah, right? Or to the governorship. Right? How so? Well, if I tell people, for example, that God appointed me, and I happen to be a corrupt leader, then what's going to happen? Then people are going to, people are not necessarily too discerning, right? They're going to say, oh, okay, so everything's predestined. So I'm predestined to have a bad leader. I don't have a choice in changing that leader. Right? In reality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, He gives us the choice to choose whether we follow the righteous, right or not. Okay. Somehow, with this smoke screen, over and over, it was taught to these people that they are predestined to have someone like this. And we find this within the Sahih themselves, the books of our brothers and sisters. One of them says that you are to follow your prince, even if he was to strike your very backbone with a sword, even if he was corrupt. Right? And that's why Muawiyah ended up staying in power, and that's why Yazid was also accepted as a caliph, right? Starting from Sham. So then, him coming along and through Ibn Ziyad first, when he says to Sayyidina Zainab alayhi salam, all gratitude is to Allah who killed Hussein and exposed the family of the Holy House. Exposed him and his lies and the family of the Holy House. We understand now why Yazid would also say the same thing. All gratitude is to Allah for killing the liar, the son of the liar, for saying this about the Imam. That's exactly what he said. And then what does he say? He says, convincingly in his mind, so he convinces all those around him that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did this to you. How do you like what Allah did to you? And that's one Sayyidina Zainab in both instances. And this is essential, and it's at the very core, by the way, of the aqa'id, of the very theology, the very creed of Islam. Sayyidina Zainab here, she took on a really important role by explaining this issue of predestination. Why? Because today we see the very effects that people thinking that things are predestined, all things are predestined has on them, right? They say, oh, well, I'm predestined to fail. I'm predestined to have a bad marriage. I'm predestined to, be at the lower levels of society. I'm predestined. What happens is that removes all purpose from. That makes us feel as though life is purposeless, and it makes us feel as though Allah is unfair, right? Because how is it fair for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to appoint a cruel tyrant dictator, right? How cruel would Allah be? Very cruel. And that's why, of course, it's essential to prove that Allah is unlimited and all perfect, and therefore it becomes logical to easily refuse this right? This false one. And however, think about how many people actually believe this, right? And how long they were able to propagate this, and how they were able to control the masses, right? This form of thinking through this very form. It's essential for Sayyidina Zainab alayhi salam. But when he said this, she would respond to him and say, for example, to other prophets, she would say to him that it's not the one who did this to us. Right? I've only seen beauty from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It really what she was saying is ugliness came from your bad choices, right? There was nothing but beauty from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Surely we guide him to the straight path. Either he is thankful or he is disbelieving. So if you're disbelieving, you're in a state of ugliness. If you follow and are obedient to Allah, you follow that straight path of Sirat al-Mustaqim, then you are on the path of Allah. That's what we recite every day when we recite Fatiha. Guide us to the straight path. صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم, the path of those upon which those whom you have blessed, right? غير المغضوب عليهم, those who you are not angry with, right? So who are those? Those are angry. And so that's why she said, ما رأيت إلا جميعا. And this is and what she said, surely it wasn't Allah that killed Imam Hussein, it was other than him. That was her way of using taqiyya to say it was you. It was the bad choices of people such as you, who are kafura, who fell into disbelief, right? And disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We find also this very clear, and just as we mentioned yesterday, when they were brought into the court of Yazid, and the Imam al-Sajjad, Ali ibn Hussein, what does he tell Yazid? He says, what would the Prophet of Allah think if he was to see us and see his household like this, tied up in ropes? And that's when he would put. So indicating what? Indicating then that you have a choice, right, as to how the Prophet would proceed. And in that instance, he took the choice to cut them. When Yazid said, all gratitude is to Allah who killed Hussein. Sayyidina Zainab alayhi salam, how does she respond again? She says to him, no, it was the people that killed him. So once Sayyidina Zainab salamullah alayhi got up there and she delivered her speech, and this was an extremely important speech in which she clarified everything that was done to them. Right? So when I say clarified everything that was done to them, let me give you an example. So the narrator says, فقامت زينب بنت علي بن أبي طالب. Zainab got up. فقالت الحمد لله رب العالمين. All gratitude is to Allah. صلى الله على رسوله وآله أجمعين. May Allah praise the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his messenger, and all of his household. Just by that statement alone, right? She's shown her aqidah, right? And what does she say? She says, صدق الله سبحانه كذلك يقول. Truthful is Allah, exalted is He, for that is what He says. ثم كان عاقبة الذين أساءوا السوء. And then the punishment of those who ill deed, right, will also be evil. And كذبوا بآيات الله, but they disbelieved in the signs of Allah and the verses of Allah. What verses? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet to say, قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ أَجْرٍ إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. Say, I do not ask you for any reward except that you show allegiance and love and kindness and loyalty to my near of kin. So she's indicating here that Yazid and his followers, what did they do? They disbelieved. They didn't follow the verses, the clear verses that tell them to have allegiance and loyalty to the messenger of Allah. So they fell off that path. They never even got on it in the first place, right? And then she says, وَكَانُوا بِهَا يَسْتَهْزِئُونَ. She indicates very clearly, not only did they not follow these verses and these commands of Allah, but they also belittled them and made fun of them. And then she says, أَظَنَنْتَ يَا يَزِيدُ حَيْثُ أَخَذْتَ عَلَيْنَا أَبْطَارَ الْأَرْضِ وَآفَاقَ السَّمَاءِ فَأَصْبَحْنَا نُسَاقُ كَمَا تُسَاقُ الْأُسَرَاءُ إِنَّ بِنَا هَوَانًا عَلَى اللَّهِ. She says to him, do you think, O Yazid, that by you enchaining us, right, and creating us on God's earth and under God's stars, that by doing so, that you have decreased our status to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? أن تساق بنا أسراء إن بنا هوانا على الله وبت عليه كرامة, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has brought down our status and He has elevated yours. وإن ذلك لعظم خطرك, and that is proof that you have great status with Allah. فشمخت بأنفك, and so you raised your nose, right, in pride. ونظرت في عطفك جبلان مسرورا حين رأيت الدنيا لك مستوثقا, and so you became extra proud and thinking that the world is your oyster, right? And that you have been given everything that you wanted. والأمور متسقة and everything is in order as you want it to be. وحين صفى لك ملكنا and when our dominion and our power was usurped by you, وسلطاننا that you are that Allah has increased your status. What does she say? She says, wait, just wait. ونسيت قول الله تعالى, you forget that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, ولا يحسبن الذين كفروا أنما نملي لهم خير لأنفسهم. We those who disbelieve think that what we're allowing them to do is good for them. إنما, meaning those who fall into disobedience of Allah. Gives them the opportunity to keep making choices and they keep making bad choices. He says, إنما, Allah continues in saying, إنما نملي لهم ليزدادوا إثما ولهم عذاب. Allah says, we give them the opportunity, yes, to rectify, but they keep making the right choices until they end up causing their own torturous and humiliating. And then she says, أمين العبد يا ابن الطلقاء تفجيرك حرائر وإمائك وسرقك بنات رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله سبايا قد هتكت ستورهم قد هتكت ستورهم عفوا صلى على محمد. Now, what does she do? She clarifies them. She said, do you think by you taking the holy household of the Messenger of Allah, the women tying them up, parading them in front of all these people, right? Putting their face coverings so that everybody would see them as you're parading them and tying them in ropes, right? But that's going to increase your status with Allah, with His Messenger. تحشو بهن الأعداء من بلد إلى بلد. You take them from land to land. بعد الأمن واستشرفهن أهل المناعم والمناقب وتصفح وجوههن القريب والبعيد والبنية والشريف ليس معهن من رجالهن ولي. You take them, you drag them across from land to land, right? Without them even having, a guardian with them, these women, in front of those who are worth something and those who are worth nothing. ولا من حماتهن حمل, neither do they have a protector to protect them. Is this how courageous you are? Is this how much you think Allah has increased your status that you're able to treat those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has graced and chosen and appointed to be His representatives and the mothers of His representatives on this earth? This is how you treat them, and you think that Allah has given you privilege by doing so? Until she continues and she gets to the point where she says, so she literally berates him and she collects all of the falsities and false thinking of him making the command, هكذا فعل الله بالحسين, that this is what Allah has done to Hussein. And she continues and she goes on to say, she says, she quotes the Holy Quran where Allah says, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ عِندَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. Do not, Allah, if you forget the verse where Allah says, do not think that those who have been killed in the way of Allah are dead, but rather they are living with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You think you're actually good with Imam al-Hussein, is what she's telling him. She's exposing him. And then what does she say? She says, وَحَسْبُكَ بِاللَّهِ حَاكِمًا وَبِمُحَمَّدٍ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ قَصِيمًا. It's enough for us, she says, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be the one who will be judging. And then who will be your opponent? Supporting him. وسيعلم من سول لك ومكنك من رقاب المسلمين. And then it will become clear who it is that placed you in this position of power and allowed you to act in such a way. Until she says, فإلى الله المشتكى, and to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala we complain. Because Imam Ali, he says, من اشتكى كافر فقد اشتكى من الله. He who complains to a disbeliever has complained from Allah. ومن اشتكى لمؤمن فقد اشتكى إلى الله. And he who complains to a believer has complained to Allah. Sayyidah Zainab, when she's saying, although she's not complaining to Yazid, right? She's berating him, she's complaining to Allah. But what does she say? She says, إلى الله اشتكى. إلى الله المشتكى. To Allah I complain. Right? وعليه المعول. And upon him I depend. فكد كيدا. Right? Then conspire as you will. وسع سعيك. And do what you will. وناصر جهدك. And put as much effort as you want in doing so. For Allah, لا تمحو بالقمر. For by Allah, you will not erase our remembrance. ولا تميت رحمنا. And you will never put an end to the revelation that came to our household. ولا تدرك أمدنا. And you will never understand the longevity and the endurance of and the importance of and our effect upon generations to come. ولا ترحض عنك عارة. And this work, that what you have done and the disgrace that you have brought to yourself, you will never be able to erase. وهل رأيك إلا فند وأيامك إلا عدد. And is your opinion just something from yourself that is not rooted in the words of Allah and the Sunnah of His Prophet? وأيامك إلا عدد. And your days are numbered. وجمعك إلا بدد. And those who are around you eventually will leave your side. يوم ينادي المنادي لا لعنة الله على الظالمين. On the day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will call out and say, surely the damnation of Allah is upon those who oppress. And then she says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Gratitude, thanks to Allah. Look at how she shows his version of gratitude to Allah. And notice the version of Sayyidah Zainab's gratitude to Allah. She says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. الذي ختم لأولنا بالسعادة. He who sealed the life of the first of us with happiness, والمغفرة and forgiveness, and to the last of us whom He granted martyrdom. والرحمة and mercy. ونسأل الله أن يدخل لهم الثواب. And we ask that Allah completes for them the reward. ويوجب لهم المزيد. And that Allah gives them even more plentifully. ويحسن علينا الخلافة. And that He allows us to be their successors and to do so righteously and virtuously. إنه رحيم ودود وحسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل. Surely He is all forgiving and He is all loving. وحسبنا, and surely all we need is Allah. We want upon Him we depend. And so we understand that this whole concept of it was a fight, right? A strategy, right? Muawiyah, Yazid, the Umayyad dynasty, their goal was to be able to control people by controlling their very concept of religion. And it ended with, and Sayyidah Zainab, in that speech, when she stood up to him, and she not only berated him, but broke down the very strategy, right? Obliterated it completely, right? And she didn't only show that his ideology, his creed, was completely correct, right, through her words, but she also showed how emotionally this man was completely, he was so far gone from his drunkenness, from his corruption, right, and from that his heart had become so harsh, right, that he would treat the women and children in such a manner. So much so, brothers and sisters, that say that the youngest daughter of Imam Hussein Salamullahi alayhi would keep asking and crying to see the head of her father, Imam Hussein. And it was then that Yazid, looking at her, he'd ask, what is it that she wants? Why is she crying so much? They'd say to him, she wants to see her father. She misses her dad. So what does he do? He says, well, give her dad. And he sends the saucer that has the head of her father, Imam Hussein Salamullah alayhi, to her. He says, here, give it to her. Now, Ruqayya, she comes, she sits in front of the saucer, and she sees the head of her father once it's revealed to her, and she hugs it, and she cries and cries, and cries, right? But then she goes silent. And they wonder what's going on. And everybody's asking what happened. Yazid asked her, she went silent. Why is she silent? Sayyidah Zainab Salamullah alayha, she hugs her, she shakes her. Imam Ali Sajjad Salamullah alayhi, he says to her, dear Auntie Zainab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taken his trust. She is now with her father Hussein. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. It is then that it is said after the speech of Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam that Imam Sajjad salamullah alayhi would also go. And he would deliver a scathing speech. A speech so scathing that Yazid would want them to stop being in this court, and he would remove them from there because he was afraid that there would be dissent amongst his ranks. And where would he place them? He placed them outside in a house that was roofless, that according to the narrations would not keep them warm during the cold and would not keep them cool during the heat. They would stay there for several days until they would be released to return to Medina. And he would send with them troops to ensure that they would get to Medina. And that is when Medina would start on the journey towards that land. Today, we see so many people within, whether it's from Iran or whether it's from Pakistan, from the Gulf countries, or whether it's from the United States or Canada or Europe, all coming and converging in that is the land of the prophets, so that this event of the release of the Sayyidah Zainab, that wouldn't be the end of what Sayyidah Zainab children. Reach Karbala on the 40th. After that, they still had the trip to go back to Medina. And you can imagine, brothers and sisters, the heads were given by Yazid, released to Imam Sajjad Salamullahi alayhi, as the women and children were gathered so that they would return towards Karbala. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا على بيت رسول الله إلى أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. We ask you, we beseech you that you accept what little we offer, that you enlighten our hearts with the knowledge of that, that you allow us to see the reality of things. We beseech you that you accept what little we offer during these nights, that you accept and that you grant the requests of all those who have needs in these nights, Ya Rahman. And we ask you and we beseech you that you allow us to be as you want us to be, not as we want to be, unless it's how you want us to be. Allah, we ask you and we beseech you that you repay the debts of those who have debt, of the oppressors and of all oppression, that you rid us of this illness of corona, that you give help to all those who are inflicted by it and inflicted by other diseases or illnesses from it. We ask you and we beseech you that you support all those that make programs like this possible, Ya Allah. We ask you and we beseech you that you bestow your mercy upon the dearly departed of the founders of the center, the volunteers that make this program happen, whether in the past, today, and in the future. We ask you and we beseech you, Ya Allah, that you hasten the appearance of the Imam Hajjah Salamullah, that you support our Maraja. وآخر دعوانا الصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين والفاتحة على أرواح المشهورة المشروعة والصلاة على